Hey everyone, my name's Calvin and welcome to my Procreate watercolor tutorial. In this video we're going to paint a very simple watercolor rose like this one here. And the first thing I'm going to do in Procreate here is just open up a new blank watercolor paper texture. And then for the brushes, I'm just going to use the normal watercolor kit, and I'll put links to everything I use in this video down below. So to get started, I'm going to do a quick sketch. So let me grab the HB pencil, and I'll choose a dark color for that. There we go. And I'm just going to start by sketching out a circle. And then inside, I'm going to draw a very small circle like that. And then I'm just going to go around and draw this kind of like fish scale pattern. Just kind of like this. And I'll sort of try to build them off each other, kind of like that. And I don't want to get carried away and add too many. I'm trying to make them kind of like exponentially bigger and bigger as I go out. And then also, the bigger they get, you can make them sort of more and more wavy like this. And just kind of overlap them, just kind of like scales or something. There we go. And it's generally very round. It doesn't look right if you have any big missing areas, so try to make it as round as you can, but do try to make those kind of wavy pattern on the edges there. And just make sure in the very middle, you add a little curl there to the very inner one. And then just notice how they start out quite small, and then they get bigger faster and faster until they're just like probably 20 times the size on the outer edge. So now I'm going to add some color, but I'm going to do that on a different layer than the sketch. So I'll make a new layer like that, and then move it underneath the sketch. And then I can sort of lighten the sketch layer just so I can barely see it. And then on this layer below, I'm just going to do the first layer of color. So I'm going to use the slider here and just bring it all the way to the red, the maximum red. And then I'm going to choose a pretty light, kind of a light red, a pink color like that. And then using the abstract round brush at the largest size, I'm just going to roughly fill in my sketch. This is just kind of the background color for the flower. There we go. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's okay if it's messy. We can clean all of this up later on. Next, I'm going to go and make a new layer on top of that background color layer. And I'm going to select a darker version of that red color, that rosy red. And I'm going to select the abstract round brush. And almost at its biggest size, basically, I want it to be able to be quite small, but when I press harder, it gets bigger. This is probably too big, so I'll shrink that a little bit more. Let's zoom in here. And this is a little bit hard to explain, but I think if you see it, it'll make sense. I'm just starting really lightly, and then as I'm following that sketch, I'm pressing harder, and then as I reach the end, I'm lightening it up. I'll do a bigger one so you can see it better. So let's do this one here. I'm starting very light, just like that, and then I press harder, just following the edge of that pencil line, and then at the end, I lighten it up again, just like that. So I'm going to go through and work my way from the middle out and do all the petals like this. So there we go. I've done all the petals. I've dropped in all the color here. Just keep in mind that I'm trying to stay inside that pencil line, but I don't really worry about what happens on the other side of that pencil line. Now I'm going to grab the water blender, and just big enough to kind of fit in between there. I'm going to try to blend some of these inside edges, but I'm going to be careful not to accidentally hit the outer edge of the inner petals. There we go. And you might have noticed I sort of focused on the bigger petals. It's really too hard to get in here and really blur the edges of those, so I just leave those pretty hard edged. Just focus on the bigger petals. And next, I want to add this kind of gradient. So in the middle, it's going to be much darker, and then it's going to get lighter on the way out. So let me turn off my sketch layer. And then I've got the main color layer here selected. So what I'm going to do is grab the selection tool, set to freehand, and I'll circle the middle about like that. And then I'll feather it out quite a bit. I'll go over to my favorite hue, saturation, and brightness setting here. And I'm going to darken the brightness and then really ramp up that saturation. And I'm going to do the same thing to the outside, but I'll lighten it. So I'll grab that selection tool and I'll do a kind of donut shaped selection, just like this, going along the outside. And then when I feather it out, it'll kind of join those two together. There we go. So I've just selected the outer edge. I'll go to hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll lighten that up, just like that, and I'll desaturate it a little bit. There we go. Now I'm going to go to my the background color layer. If you remember, this one we did first. I'm going to do a similar thing, but I'm just going to darken the inside here. So I'll circle the inside like that. I'll feather it out. Hue, saturation, and brightness. We'll darken that. Raise the saturation a little bit. Now when I turn on my main color layer, you'll see it has that same, it sort of matches that kind of gradient where it gets darker and darker towards the center. But it is a good idea to sort of play with the saturation of that background color layer. So I'll raise the saturation, maybe shift the hue a little bit. There we go. I guess it worked out as being, I made the background a little bit of a slightly warmer version of that red color. It kind of has this glowing feeling. So we're almost done with this rose here. So I'm going to make one more layer on top of everything. And using that same red color, I'm just going to make it a bit darker like that. I'll grab the abstract round brush, and at a pretty small size, I'm just going to randomly sort of add some lines like this. But I'm going to pulse the thickness, so pressing hard and soft so I get that line variation. And this one is totally an optional step here, but I'm going to grab that layer and change the opacity to color burn, and then shrink the opacity down to 0, and then just slowly raise it back up until I can just barely see it over here. There we go. It just adds kind of another layer of colors. So now we'll zoom out here, and it does look a little bit flat, so I'll do that color variation trick I do. I'll just merge these together first, and then I'll go over to hue, saturation, and brightness, or actually I'll make that selection, just a kind of random selection like this. And then I'll feather it out. And then hue, saturation, and brightness. And I'll just shift the hue a little bit. There we go. Just a little bit more yellow. There we go. And this could be done. This rose could be done, but I want to add some leaves in the background. So let me shrink this rose down a little bit on my artboard. I'll make a new layer on top of the rose. And I'll grab a nice sort of soft green color like that. And I'll use the abstract round brush at the biggest size, and I'll just quickly do some real simple sort of dart-shaped leaves. And let me fill that one in a little bit more. And an easy way to just cut the edge of the leaves is just grab that selection tool and then sort of circle the area that you want to cut, just like that. And then I'll go over to my layers panel, and if I just tap that layer and click clear, it'll just delete whatever I'd selected. It's just an easy little trick that I use a lot. And let me grab the water blender, and I'll just blend some of these hard edges here, but I'll leave a few behind. And I want to split these leaves. This is just an easy way to add detail, I guess, to leaves. I'll just sort of cut them in half like that, and I'll do add to add another selection. And I've just gone through and selected half of each leaf. And now I'll go to hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll just lower the brightness just a little bit. It just kind of gives it a little bit of dimension. And now I want to add a shadow, but first it looks like my selection wasn't super great here, and I covered up the rose a little bit too much. There we go. I wanted to add a shadow on the leaf, as if the rose is kind of casting a shadow. So don't do an even shadow all the way around. Do a selection like this that sort of very closely follows the edge. Over here, and then a little bit more, and then maybe a much bigger one. So they're not all exactly the same thickness. So now when I go to hue, saturation, and brightness, I'll just darken that area of the leaf, just like that, and that adds a kind of shadow. And then I can grab my water blender here, and a pretty small size, and I'll just break up that hard edge in a few areas. And then as a final step for the leaves here, I'll just do a random selection, just cover a few areas of these leaves, and then I'll feather that out, and then hue, saturation, and brightness, and I think I'll just shift the hue a little bit towards blue. And this would be done. This is just a simple way to draw a really fun sort of upward facing rose. Let me know what you think of this video in the comments, but other than that, guys, thank you so much for your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.